Hello, hey, it's Derek Applegate again. I'm doing second chance on the week 7 habits. I had a little technical difficulty beforehand, so that's why we're a little bit late. I guess my sound just was not working too well. So hopefully we'll get some people back on here. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to repeat the best I can. Week 7, mindset of happiness and joy, habits. You know, the interesting thing about this understanding for me that's been really great is how simplistic it is. That it's not some quote major issues of just trying to calculate and figure out every little aspect of your life, but it really is, it can be broken down to 3 basically simple components. And those components are, where do you think your well-being is coming from? And that's huge. You know, understanding where your well-being comes from, because there's only 2 places it can come from. It's either coming from an inside out or an outside in. And unfortunately, in this world, most people believe that your well-being comes from outside in. It is the circumstance around your life that causes your well-being. And that's an illusion. It actually comes from within. That you have a sense of well-being is innate. And that's one of those core principles of who we are as a human being, is that well-being comes from within. The other aspect that makes it so simple is that our experience of life is 100% thought generated. That is the only way that we can experience life, is via thought in the moment. It's how we experience life. It's the thoughts that go on up here really is how we experience life. So hey, if the sound's working, kind of give me some thumbs up. I had some problems with it earlier, but just let me know if the sound's working. That would be great. But as I was talking about, is that we have a sense of well-being, but we also experience life through thought. And our ability to have awareness, the ability to understand kind of where those things, thanks, let me know it's working, where we understand the inside out nature of life, or where our experience comes from, it gives us a little bit of power to be able to navigate it. So a lot of times what I will do is, when I'm working with people, is they wonder, well, I've got these habits that I want to break. You know, that's what they're up against, is certain habits. So with this understanding, it might lead me a little bit different way of looking at life, is where does habits come from and how are habits formed? Well, for one, habits are actually just thought, because everything comes from thought. It's just, that's how we experience it. But thought and habits, the reason why we do a habit is because it's a behavior. And the reason why we do behavior is because we're doing that for that sense of well-being. See, all behavior and all habits are designed to either protect you from losing the sense of well-being, or for you to do a behavior so that you can receive a sense of well-being. Does that make sense? And when you understand that, if you have a misunderstanding, let's say, that your well-being comes from outside of you, it comes from circumstance, then it's a lot easier to maybe get into the habits that you don't really like. And there's just that well-being is huge. I'm sorry, but it really is huge, because that's where we experience life. So a habit is basically our best attempt to maintain our sense of well-being would be the simplest way to put it. Now, I always have people ask me about, well, what about good habits versus bad habits? What are good habits and what are bad habits? And I need to get better habits, so I need to replace the bad habits with good habits. Well, to me, when you understand where the habit comes from, that the habit was just basically is your innocent attempt to have a sense of well-being, that it just gives you a new perspective. But how I would define a bad habit is I would define a bad habit as any behavior that you do that physically harms yourself or harms someone else. I would consider that a bad habit. One of the things that comes up a lot is the, let's say, smoking. Something that has a physical component to it. Well, how do I break that habit? How do I change that habit? Because it's an addiction, or it's a part of my identity. It's who I am. I've always been a smoker. I will always be a smoker. But it still comes down to thought. It still comes down to the understanding of where your well-being is coming from. Because smoking, I think most common sense people, rational adults, will actually say that smoking is a bad habit. It's something that we should stop. It does not benefit your health. However, we've got millions of people that smoke knowing that it's not good for them. So explain, well, why is that? I mean, they know that it's not good for them, so why are they still doing it? And the easiest, simplest way that I would explain it to it is that their sense of well-being to quit smoking maybe is right here. And I'd have a sense of well-being if I quit smoking, and it's here on this level. But the well-being I will lose if I stop smoking is up here. So in other words, I will have a greater sense of well-being by smoking than I do by not smoking. And so there's that disconnect. And the only way a person will stop smoking is if that disconnect goes. So in other words, when stopping the behavior, when they have a thought and a realization of consciousness that the stopping of the behavior will give them a greater sense of well-being than doing the behavior, that's when they'll stop. And that's with any habit, is that it's just kind of giving you a guide of where you think your well-being's coming from. And that it is just thought. And one of the things that people talk to me about sometimes when it comes to those is that I have urges. I have overwhelming urges to smoke, or I have overwhelming urges to do whatever behavior it is that they do, or whatever habit they have. And they oh, but I just crave the cigarettes, and I can't get rid of that craving. Well, again, everything is thought, and a craving is just a thought. And because it's just a thought, and you know that it's free-flowing, and it's arbitrary, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to stay. So the only difference between a non-smoker and a smoker is not that they don't have cravings or don't think about smoking, is the non-smoker just doesn't pay attention to it, just doesn't care. They'll have a craving of a cigarette, and they'll just go, well, that just happens to be a craving. And when you're first getting off cigarettes, there is that craving because it is a physiological need. But when they understand that it's just a thought, and the craving's going to go away just like any other thought, and your common sense will kick in. And you may have common sense that you're going to do tapering back. You might have a common sense that will tell you to quit smoking and just stop it cold turkey. One of my best experiences I ever had with a person who had smoking was, there was a man that told me that how he quit smoking was he was actually shaving in the morning, and he had his shaving cream on his face, and he looked in the mirror as he started to shave and realized that he had a cigarette in his mouth. And it just hit him. Oh my gosh. I can't even start the day without a cigarette. How pathetic is that? And he took that cigarette out of his mouth and threw it away. Took the rest of his cigarettes and tossed them out. Now, he never smoked again. And the reason being is that he had a shift in his mind that his well-being was more important being a non-smoker than it was being a smoker. Did that mean that he never had an urge to smoke again? Yeah, of course he did. But he just allowed that thought to pass. Now, in the same concept, we have thought habits. We have habits that may not necessarily serve us, that are repetitive behaviors that give us angst. And there's just this space where I found, see, one of my thought habits that I used to have is I had a thought habit that I was really scared of criticism. I don't like being criticized. And when I had the sense that my well-being was determined on whether or not someone was going to criticize me or not, I did a lot of procrastination. I did a lot of behaviors that I knew probably weren't beneficial to me to really get on with my life, to take care of my business, to take care of the things that I needed. And then all of a sudden there was just this little shift that I realized that criticism does not take away my well-being, because my well-being is innate. And that criticism is actually just a part of being human. It's a part of life. If you're going to do anything in life, there's going to be people who are going to criticize you. Even us. I'm probably the worst critic of my life. I badger myself horribly. But I find myself, when I am my worst critic, it's when I fell asleep and forgot that my well-being comes from within inside me. And as soon as I remember that, then that critical voice just finally hushes up. See, I think one of the myths that people have, because they have that outside-in mindset, is that somehow we're going to change our life where we're never going to feel sad, we're never going to feel bad, we're never going to have a horrible experience again in our life. And that's the goal. And that's an unobtainable goal. One of the analogies I think of, and I don't know if this is going to work, but if you're a parent, you've probably had the experience where your child comes up to you and says, I want to do something. Or you need the child to do something. So you tell it. And let's say, okay, kid, it's time to go to bed. And the kid goes, I don't want to go to bed. Why do I have to go to bed? And the parent says, because I'm the adult and I told you so. Now, I'm not saying whether that's the right comment to make as a parent or not. But the reality of it is if you've got a 5-year-old, if you've got a 10-year-old, you are the parent. And there is a certain amount of consciousness and learning curve that you have as a parent that you do know what's best for the kid. That's why you tell them to eat their vegetables, because you know what? They can't live on donuts alone. Right? But kind of in the same thing as an adult, we go, why do I feel sad? Why am I feeling miserable? Why am I having this frustration in my life? Why do I have these habits? It's because you're human and you have thought. That's it. There's a part of us being human that we fight, that we don't want to experience our humanness part of our lives, of feeling bad. But when you realize that all feelings are, again, is just a projection of where your thinking is in that moment, you know, it just releases a lot of pressure. I don't know if that makes any sense to you or not. But it has for me. So for now, for me, is I'm not scared of my feelings. I'm also not scared of my habits. Because in all reality, the habits are there to serve me. Because it's pointing me to behavior of my well-being. And I found that trying to change my habits is kind of futile. But I found for me is that when I realized where my well-being was coming from, the common sense kicked in. And I was able to just relax a little bit and just do what I need to do when it shows up. And when I feel frustration, I know it's time just to relax. So I don't know if this has been helpful at all for you, but maybe this week just look at your habits and maybe not try to downgrade them or try to analyze them as good or bad, but maybe look at them more as that, well, it's just kind of like behavior too. Is the habit is there for your well-being. It's there trying to direct you to a sense of well-being. And when you realize that well-being doesn't come from outside, it doesn't come from circumstance, it comes from within. Just get curious and see, does that change kind of how you look at your habits? Because habits do change, because habits are thought. And because we understand the nature of thought, thought's free-flowing, thoughts change, thoughts change. Thoughts are arbitrary. And because everything is created by thought, soul's our habit. And habits can change also. There's nothing that's permanent in our life except for we experience our life 100% via thought in the moment, brought forth into our consciousness. Well, I hope this has been beneficial to you. If you want to continue the conversation a little bit, feel free to get out and contact me. On my Facebook page, send me a message, or there's an email button on my Happiness and Joy fan page. Send me an email, and if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. Feel free to do that. I'm more than willing to talk to anybody about how this experience works. If you have any more questions, please just give me a call. And I see my niece Jessie. Thanks for showing up. I will talk to you later, and next week we'll try to tie a little bit of this together and figure out a way that we continue to keep this conversation going. Hey, thanks a lot. Love you lots. Talk to you next week. Bye.